What if I told you that everything you've ever feared was nothing more than an illusion, a shadow created by your own mind with no real substance or power? Have you ever wondered why some people can face seemingly impossible challenges with peace and certainty, while others are paralyzed by the smallest uncertainty? The answer lies deeper than you might think. It's not about courage or willpower. It's about connection, a divine connection that, when remembered, dissolves fear as naturally as light dispels darkness. Has this ever happened to you? You wake up at 3 a.m., heart pounding, mind racing with worries about your health, your finances, your relationships, and no matter how much you try to reason with yourself, the fear just grows stronger. We've all been there. But what if I told you that this experience isn't showing you the truth about your situation? It's revealing a profound spiritual disconnection. You see, fear doesn't come from external circumstances. The promotion you might not get, the relationship that seems to be failing, the diagnosis you're dreading. None of these are the true source of your fear. Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover might completely transform how you experience fear forever. The root of all fear, every single form it takes, is the belief in separation from God, from Source, from the divine intelligence that created and sustains all life. When we forget our divine origin, fear finds fertile ground. But when we remember who we truly are, fear simply cannot exist. Think about it. If you truly knew, not just intellectually, but in the depths of your being, that you are eternally connected to an infinite source of love, wisdom, and power, what would there be to fear? If you recognized that the same force that keeps planets in orbit and causes flowers to bloom is actively working through your life, would you still feel alone and vulnerable? If this message is resonating with you so far, I'd love to hear your story in the comments below. What fears have held you back the most in life? What has helped you overcome them? Your experiences aren't just valuable to me. They're essential for others who are walking the same path and need to know they're not alone. And if you're finding value in this perspective on fear, consider giving this video a like. It might seem like a small gesture, but it actually helps this message reach others who might be struggling with fear right now, perhaps feeling isolated in their experience. Your single click creates ripples of hope. We've noticed that over 80% of our viewers aren't yet subscribed to the channel. If these explorations of spiritual truth and practical wisdom speak to you, subscribing is the best way to ensure you don't miss future content. More importantly, you become part of a growing community of seekers who are committed to living from a place of divine remembrance rather than fear. What you're about to discover in the next few minutes might surprise you, because fear isn't something you need to fight or overcome through struggle. Fear is merely a forgetting, a temporary amnesia of your spiritual nature. And the antidote isn't more strength or better coping techniques, it's remembrance. Fear is not a spiritual reality. It has no substance or power of its own. It's a mental projection, a shadow cast by a mind that has momentarily disconnected from truth. And like any shadow, it can be dissolved not by attacking it, but simply by turning on the light of spiritual awareness. Let me show you how this understanding can transform your relationship with fear forever. When we approach fear with battle language, fighting, conquering, overcoming, we're already giving it more power than it deserves. It's like trying to fight a shadow by punching at it. Your fist simply passes through and the shadow remains, perhaps even growing larger from your attention. This is where most personal development approaches miss the mark. They teach us to confront our fears head-on, to push through them with willpower. But have you noticed how exhausting that battle becomes, how it never truly ends? That's because you can't defeat what isn't real to begin with. The journey toward fearlessness isn't about gathering more weapons for the fight. It's about a profound revelation. You were created by eternal love, and in that love, there is no fear. This isn't poetry or empty philosophy. It's the hidden truth behind your very existence. Think of a child who feels completely safe in their parents' arms during a thunderstorm. The thunder still booms, the lightning still flashes, but the child rests peacefully because they trust completely in the protection surrounding them. This is our natural state, complete trust in the divine protection that has never left us, even for a moment. Fear appears only when our thoughts wander from this divine origin. It's like a child who suddenly looks up and doesn't see their parent. The panic that sets in isn't because danger has suddenly appeared, it's because the awareness of protection has temporarily vanished. The mindset shift I'm inviting you to make is radical but simple. Stop trying to defeat fear. Instead, dissolve it through truth. And the most powerful truth is this: you have never been alone, not for a single moment of your existence. This realization creates an internal transformation that no technique or strategy can match. It's not about positive thinking or affirmations. It's about remembering what is fundamentally true about your nature and the universe you inhabit. When fear arises, whether it's anxiety about the future, worry about loved ones, or concern about your health or finances, recognize it as a signal. Not a signal that something is wrong with your life, but a signal that your thinking has temporarily disconnected from truth. In that moment, your work isn't to battle the fear, but to gently bring your awareness back to presence, back to connection. The impact of this approach is profound. Rather than exhausting yourself in endless struggles against your fears, you simply turn on the light of awareness. And just as darkness cannot exist where light is present, fear cannot remain when you fully recognize your unbreakable connection to the source of all life. Behind the scenes of every fear is this same pattern: a thought wandering away from truth, creating the illusion of separation and vulnerability. The revelation that changes everything is that you can interrupt this pattern at any moment through remembrance rather than resistance. If you're following this and it's creating a shift in how you see fear, write "I remember truth" in the comments below. Now, I want to go even deeper into how this principle plays out in daily life, because understanding it intellectually is just the beginning. The real transformation happens when you apply this wisdom in those critical moments when fear actually shows up. Have you ever been in the presence of someone who radiates complete peace and certainty, even when circumstances are chaotic? There's something almost magnetic about them, isn't there? You feel calmer just being around them. This isn't coincidence or just good personality. It's the natural effect when a soul awakens to its inner power and unity with the eternal. This awakening creates a frequency shift that goes beyond words or actions. When you remember your divine connection, you become a living lighthouse. Your presence alone dispels darkness, not just for yourself, but for everyone around you. This is why the greatest spiritual teachers throughout history could walk into a room and transform the atmosphere without saying a word. They weren't doing anything, they were being something. The revelation that changed my own journey came when I realized that fear and faith use exactly the same mental machinery. Both project into the future. Both involve visualization. Both engage your emotions. Both create an energetic resonance that attracts corresponding experiences. The difference? Simply the direction of that energy. Fear is actually inverted faith. It's your magnificent creative power pointed toward what you don't want rather than what you do want. It's faith in negative outcomes rather than positive ones. It's trust placed in the shadow rather than the light. Think about that for a moment. The same mental and spiritual energy you use to worry could be redirected toward vision and possibility. The same internal capacity that creates anxiety when misused creates inspiration when properly aligned. This insight changes the entire landscape of your mindset. Rather than seeing fear as something to overcome, you can recognize it as creative energy asking to be redirected. Behind every fear is a hidden value, a reflection of something you care deeply about. The architecture of your deepest concerns reveals what matters most to you. Fear says, "What if I lose my job?" The hidden value is security and contribution. Fear asks, "What if this relationship ends?" The hidden value is love and connection. When you redirect that same passionate energy toward what you truly value rather than its potential loss, something miraculous happens. Your consciousness shifts from scarcity to abundance. The decision to practice this redirection isn't just a psychological technique, it's a spiritual practice with profound ripple effects. As you consistently choose to invest your faith in good rather than fear, your neural pathways begin to rewire. What once triggered automatic anxiety now activates curiosity and creativity instead. This journey through the shadowlands of fear reveals the surprising truth that your fears have actually been opportunities in disguise, opportunities to reclaim misplaced faith and redirect it toward what you truly want to create and experience. The most powerful revelation comes when you realize that fear has never actually been the enemy. It's been a messenger, albeit in disguise, pointing toward where your faith needs to be reclaimed and redirected. When you stop fighting the messenger and start heeding the message, your relationship with fear undergoes a complete alchemical transformation. If you've experienced this reversal, seeing fear transform into faith, write "redirecting energy" in the comments. Let's explore how this plays out in specific situations we all face, from financial uncertainty to health concerns to relationship challenges. In each domain, the same principle applies, but with unique expressions that can shift your entire experience. When we talk about the creative power of thought, we're not discussing some vague philosophical concept. We're talking about the architecture of reality itself. Every sustained thought you hold is creative energy in motion. It's a signal, a frequency, a vibration that goes out from you and, by universal law, returns multiplied. The mind doesn't respond to your wishes or even your words. It responds to what you hold in consciousness. That's why affirmations alone often fail to create lasting change. You can repeat, "I am abundant," 1,000 times, but if the underlying vibration is scarcity and worry, that's what you're actually creating more of. Think of thought as a blueprint that the universe faithfully builds from. The question isn't whether this process is happening, it's happening regardless. The question is whether you're consciously designing the blueprint or unconsciously allowing fear to draw it for you. Here's the revelation that changed everything for me. What the soul fears, it creates. Not as punishment, not because the universe is cruel, but because creation doesn't judge the content of your thought. It simply manifests it. Fear functions as a negative prayer, a request to the universe for exactly what you don't want. Job, in ancient wisdom literature, said, "What I feared has come upon me." This wasn't just poetic language. It was a precise description of the law of creation. The energy we invest in worry is actually a down payment on the very experiences we're trying to avoid. Behind the scenes of our daily experience, this process is constantly unfolding. The anxiety about finances doesn't protect you from loss. It actually encodes the pattern of lack into your experience. The worry about health doesn't safeguard your well-being. It programs your body with the very discord you fear. This isn't meant to create guilt about your thoughts. It's meant to awaken you to your power. The same mechanism that has been creating unwanted experiences can be consciously redirected to create what you truly desire. The journey toward mastering this creative power requires a fundamental mindset shift. Rather than monitoring your words, start feeling the vibration of your thoughts. Ask yourself, what am I actually holding in consciousness throughout my day? The honest answer might surprise you. Many spiritual seekers discover that despite their positive words, their mental landscape is dominated by worst-case scenarios, judgments, and subtle forms of fear. This revelation isn't a setback. It's the beginning of true transformation. You can't redirect what you haven't first acknowledged. The hidden truth that few discuss is that this creative process works with mathematical precision. It's not random or mysterious. It's as consistent as gravity. The experiences that seem to happen to you are actually reflections of what you've been mentally rehearsing, consciously or not. When you truly grasp the impact of this principle, decision-making changes entirely. You become intensely aware of what you're energizing with your attention. You begin to guard the gateway of your mind not out of fear, but out of creative responsibility. Imagine living with the constant awareness that each sustained thought is casting a vote for the reality you'll experience tomorrow. How would that change what you allow yourself to dwell on? How would it transform your media consumption, your conversations, your internal dialogue? The most powerful practice I've found is to consciously redirect thought energy the moment fear appears. Instead of fighting the fearful thought, immediately visualize and feel its opposite. Fear of lack, envision abundance flowing. Fear of illness, feel vibrant health pulsing through you. This isn't denial, it's conscious creation. If you've noticed how your thoughts seem to materialize in your experience, write conscious creator in the comments. Let's look at how this creative power operates in relationships where our thoughts create self-fulfilling prophecies that either nurture connection or reinforce separation. In relationships, we often bring our fears from the past into our present connections. We project old wounds onto new people. We anticipate rejection before it happens. We guard against betrayal, even when there's no evidence it's coming. And through this lens of fear, we literally create the very experiences we're trying to avoid. But there's a pathway through this pattern, and it's found in presence, deep, conscious presence. When you're fully in the now, past hurts and future anxieties lose their grip. This isn't just a psychological technique, it's a spiritual doorway into what mystics throughout the ages have called divine presence. The revelation that changed everything for me was understanding that fear is never overcome through struggle or force. The more you fight against fear, the stronger it becomes. Instead, fear dissolves naturally in the experience of God as an inner certainty, a knowing beyond intellectual understanding that you are held in love. Think about those rare, precious moments when you've been so completely absorbed in the present, perhaps watching a sunset, or in deep connection with someone you love, or in a state of flow while creating something. In those moments, did fear exist? Was anxiety present? Or did they simply vanish without effort? That's the secret wisdom behind the spiritual journey. God is not found in the past with its regrets or the future with its worries. The divine is experienced only in the eternal now. When you are fully present, fear cannot coexist with divine presence because they operate on different frequencies entirely. The pathway to this presence isn't complicated, but it does require a fundamental shift in awareness. Most of us spend our days lost in mental time, replaying past events or rehearsing future scenarios. Meanwhile, life itself is happening only in this moment. The breakthrough comes when you begin to anchor your consciousness in the now, not as an occasional practice, but as your primary way of being. Behind the scenes of all spiritual traditions, this same truth appears. The present moment is the only doorway to divine experience. When Jesus spoke of the kingdom of heaven is at hand, he wasn't referring to a future state or distant place. He was pointing to the immediate availability of divine presence, accessible only through the portal of now. The impact of this shift is profound. Anxiety, which always relates to the future, naturally subsides when your consciousness is firmly anchored in the present. Depression, which typically involves rumination on the past, dissolves when you're fully engaged with what is. Fear, which requires mental projection away from the now, simply finds no place to root. This mindset revolution completely transforms your journey through life. Rather than seeking security through control of circumstances, which is always limited, you discover unshakable peace through alignment with the eternal now. It's like the difference between frantically swimming against the current and learning to float in perfect trust. The hidden truth that few spiritual teachers explicitly state is that presence is not just a technique, it's the very nature of divine communion. When you're absolutely present, you're experiencing God. Whether you name it that way or not, the labels matter less than the direct experience of being fully here, completely alive to this moment. The practical application begins with small moments of presence throughout your day, not as a formal meditation, but as living awareness, feeling your breath, sensing your body, observing the world around you without judgment. These aren't spiritual exercises so much as remembrances of your true state. Each time fear arises, rather than analyzing or fighting, it simply return to presence. Feel your feet on the ground, notice your breathing, observe the thoughts without becoming them. In that spacious awareness, fear begins to lose its solidity. It becomes just another passing cloud in the vast sky of consciousness. If you've experienced moments where fear dissolved simply by being fully present, write "present awareness" in the comments. Let's explore how this principle of presence transforms not just our inner experience, but our outer circumstances as well, including health, relationships, and even material conditions. One of the most profound revelations on the spiritual journey is that the mind cannot remain empty. Nature abhors a vacuum, and consciousness is no exception. If you simply try to stop negative thinking without replacing it with something higher, the vacuum will quickly be filled again, usually with the same fearful patterns that were there before. This insight completely transforms our approach to fear. Instead of fighting against fearful thoughts, which actually energizes them further, the journey becomes one of conscious replacement. Think of it as mental alchemy rather than mental combat. The revolutionary understanding I discovered was that trying to empty the mind of fear is like trying to remove darkness from a room by scooping it out with your hands. It's not only exhausting, it's impossible. The only way to remove darkness is to introduce light. And the only way to dissolve fear is to replace it with truth. Behind the scenes of every spiritual transformation is this same pattern, not the elimination of the negative, but the introduction of the positive, not the fighting against what is unwanted, but the cultivation of what is desired. This shift in approach changes everything. The mind is always going to be filled with something. The question is, will you consciously choose what fills it, or will you allow habitual patterns and external programming to decide? This decision point represents one of the most significant opportunities for transformation in your entire life journey. When fear arises, whether it's anxiety about the future, worry about loved ones, health concerns, or financial uncertainty, the response isn't to push it away or pretend it isn't there. The response is replacement. And the most powerful replacements are spiritual affirmations that reconnect you with ultimate truth. Statements like, "God is here," or "I am one with the good," or "Nothing can threaten the child of God" aren't just positive thinking, they're declarations of spiritual reality. They align your consciousness with what is eternally true beyond temporary appearances. And when mind and truth align, a powerful resonance begins to work through your entire being. The mindset shift that makes this effective isn't about convincing yourself of something you don't believe. It's about reminding yourself of what you know at the deepest level. These aren't new truths you're trying to accept. They're ancient knowings you're remembering. Here's the hidden secret. Spiritual affirmations aren't primarily about changing external conditions. They're about restoring your awareness to its natural state of connection with Source. And from that reconnection, external conditions naturally begin to reflect your internal alignment. The impact of this practice unfolds in stages. First, You'll notice brief moments of relief from fear as you consciously replace negative thoughts. Then, you'll experience longer periods of peace as the new thought patterns begin to establish neural pathways. Eventually, spiritual affirmation becomes your default response to life, rather than a technique you apply. What makes this approach revolutionary is that it honors the nature of mind while redirecting its power. Rather than fighting against its tendency to fill with content, you work with that tendency by consciously choosing the content. It's like redirecting a flowing river rather than trying to stop it, much more effective and far less exhausting. The journey of conscious replacement requires patience and persistence. Old thought patterns have carved deep grooves in consciousness, and new ones take time to establish. But unlike the endless battle against fear, which never truly resolves, replacement eventually creates a new mental ecosystem where fearful thoughts simply find no fertile ground. I've found it helpful to have specific affirmations ready for different types of fear. When financial worries arise, I am one with the source of all supply. When health concerns appear, the life of God flows through me now. When relationship fears surface, love surrounds and protects all my connections. Having these prepared means you can respond quickly when fear appears. If you've experienced how replacing fear with truth changes your entire state of being, write "conscious replacement" in the comments. Let's explore how this practice of replacement connects with another powerful spiritual principle: the understanding that perfect love casts out all fear. What does it mean to have practical faith in your daily life? Most people approach faith backward. They wait until they feel safe before they act in trust. They want evidence before belief, proof before confidence. But on the spiritual journey, the sequence works in reverse. You act in faith first, and then the feeling of safety appears. This revelation completely transforms how we approach fearful situations. True faith isn't about having emotional certainty before taking action. It's about living as if God's protection is already at work, even when appearances suggest otherwise. It's stepping into the unknown with the quiet confidence that you are held, guided, and sustained by something greater than yourself. Behind the scenes of every seemingly miraculous life transformation is this same principle at work. The person didn't wait until all doubts were resolved before moving forward. They stepped forward despite the doubts, and in that very stepping, discovered solid ground beneath their feet that wasn't visible before they moved. Think about learning to swim. You can study swimming techniques for years, but at some point you must enter the water. And it's only in the water that you discover your own buoyancy, that the water itself supports you when you work with it rather than against it. Faith works the same way. You discover its power only by living it. The mindset shift that changes everything is recognizing that faith is not emotional exaltation or intense feeling. Authentic faith is deep peace, a quiet knowing without external proof, a resting without the need for explanation. It's being comfortable with mystery while moving forward with confidence. This understanding cuts against our culture's insistence on certainty before action. We've been trained to want guarantees, to eliminate all risk, to know the full path before taking the first step. But the spiritual journey never works that way. The path appears as you walk it, not before. The clarity emerges through movement, not prior to it. I discovered through my own journey that trying to eliminate all uncertainty before acting is actually the opposite of faith. True faith embraces uncertainty as the very space where divine guidance operates. If everything were certain and predictable, we wouldn't need faith at all. Faith exists precisely for the unknown territories of life. The transformation begins when you start making decisions from a place of trust rather than fear. Not reckless choices that ignore wisdom, but faith-centered decisions that acknowledge both the visible and invisible aspects of reality. This looks like taking that job even though you can't see every step of the career path. It's moving forward with that relationship, even though there are no absolute guarantees. It's beginning that creative project even when you don't know if it will succeed. The impact of living this way accumulates over time. Each act of faith, regardless of its immediate outcome, strengthens your spiritual muscles. Even apparent setbacks become opportunities for deeper trust rather than reasons to retreat into fear. The pattern of your life begins to reflect an unshakable certainty that transcends circumstances. Here's the revelation that few speak about openly. Faith is not primarily about getting what you want. It's about discovering who you really are. In each moment of trust, you're not just advancing towards some external goal. You're remembering your true identity as a divine being temporarily having a human experience. The practical application of this principle transforms everyday decisions. When fear arises about finances, you don't ignore practical steps, but you take them from a place of trust rather than panic. When health concerns appear, you seek appropriate care while maintaining an inner certainty of well-being. When relationship challenges emerge, you address them from a foundation of love rather than insecurity. Faith practiced this way becomes your natural orientation rather than an occasional resource in crisis. It's like breathing, not something you do only when you think about it, but the constant, unconscious undercurrent of your existence. You live from faith not because you're trying to, but because you've discovered it's the only authentic way to be. If you've experienced moments where acting in faith created a sense of safety that wasn't there before, write faith first in the comments. Now I want to explore with you one of the most powerful dimensions of fear-free living, understanding how perfect love dissolves fear completely, not as a concept, but as a lived experience. The ancient text tells us that perfect love casts out fear. Most people read this as beautiful poetry or an inspiring metaphor, but what if it's neither? What if it's actually an exact spiritual formula, as precise and reliable as any? Law of physics? This revelation completely transformed my understanding of both love and fear. The hidden truth behind this statement is that love and fear cannot coexist in the same space. They operate on fundamentally different frequencies. When one is fully present, the other must depart, not through struggle or conflict, but through the natural impossibility of their simultaneous existence. Think about a room filled with darkness. You don't need to attack the darkness, analyze it, or understand its composition to eliminate it. You simply turn on the light. In the same way, you don't need to battle fear directly. You only need to invite love, real, unconditional, divine love, to fill your consciousness. And in its presence, fear dissolves without resistance. The mindset transformation begins when you stop seeing love as merely an emotion and recognize it as the very substance of creation. Love, in its highest sense, isn't what you feel, it's what you are. It's your true nature. Beneath all the conditioning, wounding, and forgetting that has accumulated through life experience. Behind the scenes of every spiritual tradition, beyond their differences in language and ritual, lies this same recognition. Love is not something to be achieved or earned or found. It's the foundation of existence itself. And when you remember this, really remember it, not just intellectually but experientially, something profound shifts in your being. The journey toward freedom from fear is ultimately a journey of remembering love as your original state. Every spiritual practice, every moment of presence, every act of forgiveness is really about clearing away what blocks your awareness of love's constant presence. It's not about becoming loving, it's about removing what prevents you from experiencing the love you already are. I discovered through my own path that love in its perfect form creates wholeness, and where there is wholeness, there is no experience of lack. Where there is no lack, there is no perception of threat. Where there is no threat, the soul naturally rests in profound peace. This sequence unfolds not through effort, but through alignment with what is already true. The revelation that changed everything for me was understanding that love isn't just a nice addition to life. It's the very operating system of the universe. It's the fundamental reality behind appearances. When you align with it consciously, you're not just feeling better emotionally, you're syncing with the creative force that sustains existence itself. The impact of living from this awareness transforms everything. Decisions previously made from fear or scarcity now flow from abundance and possibility. Relationships shift from transactions or attachments to expressions of shared divine nature. Work becomes not just activity for survival, but a channel for creative love to flow into form. What makes this understanding revolutionary is that it's not dependent on external circumstances. You don't need perfect conditions to experience perfect love. In fact, challenges often become the very doorways through which deeper love enters your awareness. What appeared as obstacles become opportunities for remembering what fear had caused you to forget. The practical wisdom emerges when you begin to ask different questions in daily life. Rather than, "What am I afraid might happen?" you ask, "How can love express through this situation?" Instead of, "How can I protect myself?" you inquire, "What would love do here?" These questions redirect your entire orientation from fear-based to love-centered living. Think about a time when you felt completely loved and accepted, perhaps by a parent, partner, friend, or even a pet. In that moment of feeling fully loved, was there any fear, any anxiety about the future, any worry about measuring up? Most likely, in that experience of being loved, fear temporarily dissolved. Now imagine that sense of being loved expanding to include your entire existence, not dependent on any person or circumstance, but flowing from the very nature of reality itself. This isn't fantasy or wishful thinking. It's the recognition of what has always been true beneath the shifting appearances of life. Love is not just a feeling that comes and goes. It's the underlying reality that remains when all illusions fade away. And fear is simply what we experience when we've temporarily forgotten this truth. If you've experienced moments where love completely dissolved your fear, write "Love dissolves fear" in the comments. Let's explore how this understanding of perfect love as our true nature connects with the practice of inner silence, creating space for awareness beyond the constant chatter of fearful thinking. Of all the fears that grip the human heart, fear of the future may be the most pervasive and paralyzing. It's the shadow that looms over major decisions, keeps us awake at night, and sometimes prevents us from fully engaging with life. But what's really happening when we fear the future? Something quite profound and revelatory when we look closer. The mindset revelation that changed everything for me was understanding that the future we fear doesn't actually exist. It's a mental projection, a story we're telling ourselves about a time that has not yet come. And more importantly, we're imagining ourselves in that future time without the grace, wisdom, and resources that will be present when and if that moment actually arrives. Think about it this way. Have you ever noticed how you can handle difficult situations when they're actually happening, even though you worried endlessly about them beforehand? That's because grace, divine support, inner wisdom, unexpected resources operates only in the now. When you project yourself into an imagined future, you're stepping into a mental construct where grace doesn't appear to exist. The breakthrough understanding is that the future doesn't need to be predicted, controlled, or figured out in advance. The future needs to be surrendered, not in passive resignation, but in active trust. This surrender isn't about giving up responsibility. It's about acknowledging a higher wisdom at work in your life journey. Behind the scenes of every spiritual tradition is this same truth. I don't know, but God knows. This simple yet profound statement represents the ultimate antidote to fear of the future. It's not that we stop making plans or preparing responsibly. It's that we hold those plans lightly, with an open hand, rather than a clenched fist. The transformation begins when you start practicing what I call sacred surrender of tomorrow. This isn't a one-time event, but a continuous process of releasing your grip on outcomes while remaining fully engaged with today's opportunities and responsibilities. It's like dancing with the universe instead of trying to lead every step. I discovered through my own journey that the habit of mentally living in the future, either in anticipation or dread, robs us of the only moment where life actually happens, now. It's a form of self-imposed exile from reality. When you return from that exile by bringing your attention fully to the present, fear naturally subsides because it has no fuel. The impact of this practice is immediate and tangible. Energy previously consumed by worry becomes available for creativity and service. Mental space occupied by fearful scenarios clears, making room for inspiration and intuition. The quality of your decisions improves because they come from present wisdom rather than future anxiety. What makes this approach revolutionary is that it doesn't require figuring everything out. It doesn't demand that you become smarter, more strategic, or better at predicting outcomes. Instead, it invites you into a profound trust in the intelligent, loving force that created you and sustains you in every moment. Think about the times in your life when things didn't go according to plan, yet looking back, you can see a higher wisdom at work. Perhaps a relationship ended, leading to growth you couldn't have experienced otherwise. Maybe a career setback redirected you toward your true calling. These experiences weren't accidents, they were grace operating beyond your limited perspective. The practical application of surrendering the future transforms even the most anxiety-producing situations. Financial uncertainty becomes an opportunity to discover provision you couldn't have planned for. Health challenges reveal inner strength and support systems you didn't know existed. Relationship difficulties uncover deeper levels of love and understanding previously hidden. This doesn't mean we pretend everything will work out exactly as we hope. It means we recognize that whatever unfolds contains within it the seeds of our highest growth and good, even when appearances suggest otherwise. This isn't blind optimism, it's clear-eyed faith in the loving intelligence that weaves through all of existence. The daily practice involves catching yourself when you begin spiraling into future fear. Notice the physical sensations, the racing thoughts, the constriction in your body. Then gently bring yourself back to now with the reminder, in this moment I am safe. In this moment I have what I need. I don't know what tomorrow holds, but the same love that sustains me today will be there tomorrow. If you've experienced the freedom that comes from surrendering the future instead of fearing it, write sacred surrender in the comments. Now, I want to explore how this principle of surrendering the future connects with another vital aspect of freedom from fear: understanding your true spiritual power in the present moment. Have you ever noticed how much mental and emotional energy you spend either regretting the past or worrying about the future? It's as if we're constantly living in mental time rather than actual time. And in this split attention, we miss the most extraordinary revelation. All spiritual power exists only in the now. The mindset breakthrough that transforms everything is recognizing that the present moment isn't just another point on the timeline. It's the only point where life actually happens. It's the only place where divine connection is possible. It's the only space where transformation can occur. When we truly understand this, our relationship with fear fundamentally changes. Think about it this way: worry is essentially the misuse of imagination. It's taking your incredible creative capacity and using it to construct elaborate scenarios of what might go wrong. But that same imaginative power, when anchored in the present, becomes intuition, insight, and creative problem-solving. The difference isn't in the power itself, but in where and how you direct it. Behind the scenes of every spiritual awakening is this same recognition: the future doesn't need solving, the present needs your presence. When you're fully here, engaged with what is rather than what might be, you access levels of wisdom and clarity that simply aren't available to the divided mind. I discovered through my journey that what we call spiritual power isn't mysterious or magical. It's simply the natural capacity of a mind that's unified rather than scattered, present rather than absent, connected rather than isolated. And that power becomes immediately available when we stop projecting ourselves into imagined futures and return to the only moment that's real. The transformation begins to unfold when you practice what I call power presence, the deliberate anchoring of awareness in the now, not as an occasional meditation, but as your primary way of living. This isn't about ignoring legitimate planning or preparation. It's about doing those activities from a centered state rather than an anxious one. What makes this approach revolutionary is that it doesn't require adding anything to your life. It doesn't demand new skills, special knowledge, or esoteric practices. It simply asks you to stop abandoning the moment for mental constructs about past and future. It invites you to reclaim the attention you've been giving away to what isn't real. The impact of living this way is profound and immediate. Energy previously drained by worry becomes available for creative expression. Mental clarity increases because you're no longer dividing your attention. Intuition strengthens because you're actually present to receive its subtle guidance. Problems that seemed overwhelming become manageable when approached with undivided awareness. This understanding directly addresses another key dimension of fear, the twin anxieties of failure and success. Have you noticed how some people fear failure while others actually fear success? These might seem like opposite concerns, but they stem from the same false belief that you are separate from God and solely responsible for outcomes. The revelation that changes everything is seeing that both fears dissolve when you recognize your true nature. You're not a small, isolated self struggling alone against overwhelming odds. You are an expression of the divine, connected to infinite intelligence and supported by the same power that sustains galaxies. From this understanding, neither failure nor success has the same meaning or emotional charge. Fear of failure says, "What if I'm not enough?" Fear of success whispers, "What if I can't handle what comes with achievement?" Both questions assume you are alone, separate, unsupported. But when you recognize your divine connection, you understand that you are always enough because you're not limited to personal resources. And you can handle whatever comes because you're not doing it alone. The practical application transforms how you approach challenges. Instead of asking, "Can I do this?" which keeps the focus on the limited self, you ask, "How will this unfold through me?" This subtle shift acknowledges your role as a channel rather than the sole source of action and outcome. It releases the burden of being personally responsible for everything while maintaining full engagement with what's before you. If you've experienced how being fully present gives you access to wisdom and strength that worry can't provide, write "power in presence" in the comments. Let's explore how this understanding of your true spiritual nature and power connects with the hidden wisdom about false security and where true trust can be found. One of the most liberating revelations on the spiritual journey is discovering that life is not an examination you can fail. We've been conditioned to see existence as a series of tests. Some we pass, others we fail, with our worth and future prospects hanging in the balance. But what if this entire framework is based on a misunderstanding? The mindset transformation begins when you recognize that life is not an exam, but a stage of revelation. Everything that unfolds, the apparent successes and failures, the joys and sorrows, the achievements and disappointments, serves a purpose far beyond the limited perspective of getting it right. Even what appears as mistakes are contained within a greater divine purpose that's often invisible from our limited viewpoint. Think about the most significant growth experiences in your life. How many came through what initially seemed like failure? the relationship that ended, revealing parts of yourself that needed a healing, the career setback that redirected you toward your authentic path, the health challenge that transformed your priorities. Behind the scenes of every failure is often the seed of a breakthrough that couldn't have come any other way. I discovered through my own journey that the fear of getting life wrong is based on a profound misunderstanding of what life is. We're not here primarily to achieve, succeed, or prove our worth. We're here to awaken, to remember our divine nature, to express the unique facet of the infinite that we embody. And that process includes both light and shadow, both success and failure, as the world defines them. The hidden truth that changes everything is that nothing is wasted in the economy of spirit. Every experience, especially the difficult ones, contributes to your spiritual unfoldment if you're willing to receive its lessons. This doesn't mean we seek out pain or failure, but it means we no longer need to fear them as evidence of some cosmic mistake or personal deficiency. What makes this understanding revolutionary is the freedom it creates. When you no longer see life as an exam with pass-fail consequences, the desperate grip of anxiety loosens. You can engage fully with each moment, not from fear of getting it wrong, but from curiosity about what it might reveal. Your decisions come from inspiration rather than desperation. The impact of this shift in perspective transforms everything. Work becomes not just a means to prove your worth, but a canvas for creative expression. Relationships become opportunities for mutual growth rather than evaluations of your lovability. Even challenges become interesting rather than threatening when seen as part of your unfolding story, rather than judgments on your value. This understanding naturally leads to freedom from results. When living in unity consciousness, the awareness that you are inseparably connected to the divine, neither failure diminishes you nor success inflates you. Both lose their emotional charge because your sense of self is no longer derived from outcomes. Think about how exhausting it is to constantly monitor results, to rise and fall emotionally with each success or setback. It's like being on a perpetual roller coaster that never allows you to rest in your inherent value. But what if your worth was never in question? What if it was established at the moment of your creation and cannot be enhanced or diminished by anything you do or don't do? The practical wisdom emerges when you begin approaching life's challenges from this new understanding. Instead of asking, "How can I succeed at this?" which keeps the focus on results, you ask, "What is trying to emerge through this situation?" This subtle shift acknowledges that something larger than your personal agenda is at work, a divine intelligence that orchestrates even apparent setbacks toward your highest good. This doesn't mean passive acceptance of whatever happens. It means active participation from a place of trust rather than fear. You still set goals, work diligently, and care about outcomes, but you hold all of it more lightly, knowing that the ultimate purpose of any experience may be different from and greater than what you initially imagined. The daily practice involves catching yourself when you slip into seeing life as a test. Notice when you're treating a situation as a referendum on your worth or capability. Then gently remind yourself, "This is not an exam I can fail. This is an experience through which I can grow. Whatever unfolds contains a gift of awareness if I'm willing to receive it." If you've experienced the freedom that comes from seeing life as revelation rather than examination, write "divine unfolding" in the comments. Now, I want to explore how this freedom from the fear of failure connects with understanding the true nature of security and where real trust can be found. Our world offers countless forms of apparent security: financial, investments, insurance policies, academic credentials, professional achievements, social status, physical health, and relationships. We're taught from early childhood to pursue these as the foundations of a secure life, and there's nothing inherently wrong with any of them. The revelation comes when we recognize their fundamental limitation. All of them are conditional, temporary, and subject to change, sometimes in an instant. The mindset breakthrough that transforms everything is distinguishing between conditional security and true trust. Conditional security says, I am safe because of what I have or what I've done. True trust says, I am safe because of what I am and to whom I belong. This distinction isn't just philosophical. It's the difference between a life controlled by fear and one lived in freedom. Think about how exhausting it is to maintain the illusion of security through external means. The market might crash, health might fail, relationships might end, professional standing might diminish. And if your sense of safety is built on these shifting sands, you'll live in constant vigilance, always scanning the horizon for threats, never truly at rest. Behind the scenes of every spiritual teaching is this same profound truth. Only trust built on the eternal, on God, on the unchanging reality beneath all appearances, can provide unshakable peace. This doesn't mean abandoning practical wisdom or responsible planning. It means recognizing their proper place while anchoring your deepest security in something beyond the visible world. I discovered through my journey that what most people call trust is actually control in disguise. I trust things will be okay often means I trust my ability to make things okay. But true spiritual trust is radically different. It's the deep knowing that even when you cannot control circumstances, and there will always be circumstances beyond your control, you are held in a love that never fails. The transformation begins when you start practicing what I call active rest, making decisions from peace rather than fear, acting from faith rather than despair, moving through life with the quiet confidence that the invisible sustains you beyond what appearances suggest. This isn't passive resignation, it's dynamic engagement from a foundation of unshakable trust. What makes this approach revolutionary is that it doesn't rely on perfect circumstances or the absence of challenges. In fact, challenges often become the very doorways through which deeper trust emerges. It's easy to feel secure when everything's going well. The test of true trust comes precisely when external securities are shaken. The impact of living from this understanding changes everything from the most mundane daily choices to life's biggest decisions. Financial planning shifts from anxiety-driven hoarding to wisdom-guided stewardship. Health concerns are addressed with appropriate care, but without the terror that comes from equating physical well-being with ultimate security. Relationships deepen because you're no longer using others as security blankets or insurance policies against loneliness. The hidden truth that most conventional wisdom misses is that security isn't something you create through external arrangements. It's something you remember as your birthright. You were born into a universe intelligently designed to support life at every level. The same force that keeps planets in orbit, causes seeds to sprout, and coordinates trillions of cells in your body is actively involved in your life journey. This isn't fantasy. It's the fundamental reality beneath appearances. The practical application transforms how you navigate uncertainty. Instead of asking, how can I guarantee this will work out, which is ultimately impossible, you ask, how can I move forward with wisdom while trusting the process? This subtle shift acknowledges both human responsibility and divine partnership, creating a middle path between passive fatalism and anxious control. Think about the most challenging transitions in your life. Perhaps a career change, a move to a new city, the end of a significant relationship, or a health crisis. Looking back, can you see how you were held, guided, and provided for, often in ways you couldn't have planned or predicted? Those weren't coincidences. They were glimpses of the invisible support system that's always operating, whether you're aware of it or not. The daily practice involves catching yourself when you slip into seeking security in the changeable rather than resting in the eternal. Notice when anxiety arises about protecting what can't ultimately be protected through human effort alone. Then gently remind yourself, my deepest security isn't in what I have, but in what I am. A divine being temporarily having a human experience held in a love that never fails. If you've experienced moments when trust in something greater carried you through, when all external securities failed, write unshakable trust in the comments. Now, I want to explore how this understanding of true trust connects with one of the most powerful practices for dissolving fear, creating inner silence beyond the constant chatter of the worried mind. Have you ever noticed how fear manifests not just in your thoughts, but in your physical body? The racing heart during anxiety, the tight chest when worried, the digestive issues during stress, the shallow breathing when frightened. These aren't coincidental. They reveal one of the most profound and often overlooked truths of human experience. The body reflects the inner state of the soul with flawless precision. The mindset revelation that transforms everything is recognizing that your body isn't just responding to physical conditions, it's responding to consciousness. Sustained fear affects virtually every system in your physical form. Your breathing becomes shallow, your digestion weakens, your circulation constricts, your immune function diminishes, your sleep deteriorates, and your overall health gradually declines. This isn't metaphorical or merely psychological. It's a literal, measurable reality that modern science has finally begun to document through fields like psychoneuroimmunology and epigenetics. What spiritual teachers have understood for millennia, science now confirms. Consciousness shapes physical reality, beginning with your own body. Behind the scenes of every genuine healing experience is this same principle at work. True healing doesn't begin with the body. It begins with the mind, with the soul, with consciousness itself. When fear is replaced with faith, when tension yields to trust, when anxiety surrenders to acceptance, the body naturally responds to this realignment, not as a miracle, but as the logical consequence of restored harmony. I discovered through my journey that what we call disease is often misnamed. It's not random, not a punishment, and not merely a physical malfunction. In many cases, it's the body's language, the way it communicates what the conscious mind has ignored or suppressed. Physical symptoms become messengers when other forms of awareness have been overlooked. The transformation begins when you start practicing what I call conscious embodiment, paying loving attention to the physical signals that reveal your deeper emotional and spiritual state. Not with judgment or fear, but with compassionate curiosity. Your body isn't failing you when it expresses tension or imbalance. It's communicating with you in the only language available to it. What makes this approach revolutionary is that it bridges the artificial divide between physical and spiritual healing. Instead of treating the body as a machine separate from consciousness, it recognizes the profound interconnection between what you think, what you feel, and what you physically experience. This understanding doesn't replace appropriate medical care. It complements it by addressing causal levels that conventional approaches often miss. The impact of living with this awareness transforms your entire relationship with health and healing. Instead of seeing the body as something that betrays you or breaks down randomly, you recognize it as a faithful mirror of your inner state, a responsive system that's constantly seeking balance. This shift alone can initiate profound healing by removing the adversarial relationship many have with their physical form. The revelation that changed everything for me was understanding that the body doesn't need to be forced into health through will or discipline alone. It naturally moves toward wholeness when the obstructions, primarily fear in its many disguises, are removed. Just as a plant doesn't need to be taught to grow toward the light, your body inherently knows how to heal when given the right conditions. The practical application transforms how you approach any health challenge. Instead of asking only, what's physically wrong and how do I fix it, which remains important, you also ask, what is this symptom communicating? What fears or beliefs might be manifesting through this condition? This expanded inquiry opens doorways to healing that remain closed when only addressing the physical level. Think about times in your life when physical symptoms appeared or intensified during periods of emotional stress or spiritual disconnection. Perhaps digestive issues during a challenging work situation, skin conditions during relationship difficulties, immune problems during periods of feeling isolated. These aren't coincidences. They're aspects of the intricate mind-body conversation that's constantly occurring. The daily practice involves bringing gentle awareness to the body's signals without immediately trying to suppress or eliminate them. Notice areas of tension, discomfort, or imbalance. Then, instead of just treating the symptom, create space to listen to what it might be communicating. Often simply acknowledging the emotional or spiritual component begins a healing process that physical intervention alone couldn't initiate. This doesn't mean ignoring symptoms or avoiding appropriate care. It means expanding your approach to include consciousness itself as a healing force. When you address anxiety, for example, you're not just improving mental comfort, you're potentially healing the physiology that anxiety disrupts. When you cultivate trust, you're not just creating emotional ease, you're activating healing responses throughout your body. If you've noticed how your physical state changes when you shift from fear to faith, from tension to trust, write body wisdom in the comments. Now, I want to explore how this understanding of the mind-body connection relates to another powerful dimension of fear-free living, the practice of inner silence as a sanctuary from the noise that feeds anxiety. In our constantly connected world, silence has become one of the rarest commodities. From the moment we wake up to the moment we fall asleep, most of us are surrounded by noise, not just external sounds, but the more pervasive internal chatter of uncontrolled thoughts, opinions, worries, plans, memories, and mental projections. And in this cacophony, fear finds its perfect feeding ground. The mindset revelation that transforms everything is recognizing that fear cannot survive in true inner silence. It requires the fuel of mental noise to sustain itself. When the mind becomes still, not through force or suppression, but through conscious presence, fear naturally begins to dissolve, not because you've fought against it, but because you've removed the conditions it needs to exist. Think about how different types of noise affect your state of being. The alarming news cycle that triggers anxiety, the social media comparisons that activate insecurity, the opinions of others that awaken doubt, the internal voices of criticism that undermine confidence. Behind each of these is the same pattern, mental noise displacing the natural peace that lies beneath it. I discovered through my journey that creating inner silence isn't about emptying the mind through willpower, which rarely works anyway. It's about shifting attention from the content of thought to the awareness in which thought appears. This subtle but profound shift creates a spaciousness in which the anxious mind can finally rest. The transformation begins when you start practicing what I call sacred silence, deliberate periods where you withdraw attention from mental noise and rest in pure awareness. This isn't traditional meditation, though it includes it. It's a way of being that can be practiced anywhere, anytime, while walking, working, even during conversation. It's the art of being mentally quiet while physically engaged. What makes this approach revolutionary is that it doesn't require special conditions or extensive free time. It doesn't demand that you withdraw from life or spend hours in formal practice. It simply invites you to create small sanctuaries of silence throughout your day, moments where you consciously step out of the mental stream and into the stillness that's always present beneath it. The impact of living with this practice transforms your entire experience. Mental clarity increases because thoughts are no longer crowding each other out. Emotional stability deepens because feelings are given space to be felt and released rather than amplified by thinking about them. Intuition strengthens because its subtle voice can finally be heard beneath the mental clamor. The hidden truth that changed everything for me was understanding that peace is not passivity. It's power at rest, the strength of a soul that remembers its origin and surrenders control to divine principles. In our culture, we often equate power with activity, force, or dominance. But true spiritual power operates on a completely different principle. It's the serene strength of alignment rather than the frenetic energy of effort. Think about the people who have most impressed you with their genuine power. Chances are they weren't the loudest, most aggressive, or most controlling. They were likely those with a quiet confidence, an inner steadiness that didn't need to announce itself. That quality doesn't come from technique or strategy. It emerges naturally when someone has remembered their true nature and lives from that remembrance. The practical application transforms how you respond to challenge and uncertainty. Instead of reacting with more mental activity, analyzing, planning, worrying, you learn to first create inner silence. From that silence, clear action naturally emerges, not driven by fear, but guided by wisdom. It's like the difference between decisions made in a noisy, chaotic room versus those made in a quiet, centered space. Behind the scenes of every major spiritual tradition lies this same understanding. The divine speaks in silence, not in the constant chatter of the thinking mind, but in the quiet depths beyond thought. This doesn't mean thinking is wrong or unnecessary. It has its vital place. But when thinking becomes compulsive and uncontrolled, it drowns out the deeper wisdom that guides with perfect accuracy when allowed to do so. The daily practice involves creating deliberate pauses throughout your day, moments where you step out of mental activity and into simple awareness. Feel your breath, sense your body, notice the space around you, observe without analysis or judgment. These don't need to be long. Periods, even 30 seconds of true inner silence can reset your entire system from anxiety back to peace. This practice becomes especially powerful when facing decisions or challenges. Before responding to that difficult email, pause for inner silence. Before having that important conversation, create a moment of mental stillness. Before making that significant choice, step out of the noise of pros and cons into the clarity of quiet presence. You'll be amazed at how different your responses become when they arise from silence rather than mental chaos. If you've experienced how inner silence dissolves fear more effectively than any amount of mental activity, write "silent strength" in the comments. Now, I want to explore how this practice of inner silence connects with understanding the inherited patterns of fear that often operate below conscious awareness. Have you ever found yourself reacting with fear in situations where logically you know there's no real threat? Perhaps feeling anxious about money despite having enough, worrying about abandonment in a stable relationship, or experiencing irrational dread about health despite being well. These reactions often point to something profound. Many of our deepest fears weren't consciously chosen, they were inherited. The mindset breakthrough that changes everything is recognizing that fear patterns are largely programmed into us through our upbringing, cultural messages, family dynamics, and early experiences. The voice in your head that says there's never enough, or don't trust anyone, or you must be perfect to be loved, didn't originate with you. It was installed, often by well-meaning people who were simply passing down the programming they received. This revelation is both challenging and liberating. Challenging because it means confronting influences we've internalized so deeply they feel like our own authentic thoughts. Liberating because once we recognize these patterns as inherited rather than intrinsic, we can begin the powerful journey of deprogramming and reclaiming our natural state of trust and peace. Behind the scenes of every fear response is a complex interplay between the conscious mind and the vastly more powerful subconscious. The subconscious doesn't reason, analyze, or distinguish between helpful and harmful beliefs. It simply accepts and executes whatever programming it receives through repetition, emotion, and authority figures, especially during our formative years. I discovered through my journey that trying to overcome deep-seated fears through willpower or positive thinking alone rarely creates lasting change. It's like trying to change the direction of an iceberg by pushing on the tiny visible portion while ignoring the massive structure beneath the surface. Real transformation requires addressing the subconscious programming where fear patterns are anchored. The transformation begins when you start practicing what I call compassionate archaeology, gently excavating the layers of inherited fear without judgment or self-criticism. This process isn't about blaming parents, teachers, or cultural influences. It's about bringing awareness to patterns that have operated unconsciously, so they can be examined in the light of your adult understanding and spiritual wisdom. What makes this approach revolutionary is that it honors the tremendous power of the subconscious while recognizing it can be reprogrammed through conscious intervention, not through force or cognitive arguments, but through three key practices: observation without judgment, introduction of new spiritual information, and loving vigilance over mental patterns. The impact of engaging with this process transforms your relationship with fear at the root level. Instead of endlessly managing surface symptoms, the specific anxieties and worries that appear in daily life, you're addressing the underlying programming that generates those symptoms. It's the difference between repeatedly treating a rash versus identifying and removing the allergen causing it. The hidden truth that most conventional approaches miss is that the subconscious mind responds not to intellectual understanding, but to impression. It's influenced by vivid imagery, deep feeling, repetition, and authority. This is why simply knowing better intellectually often doesn't change emotional reactions. The reprogramming must occur at the same level where the original programming was installed, through impression rather than argument. The practical application transforms how you work with persistent fears. Instead of being frustrated when logical reassurance doesn't help, I know I shouldn't worry, but I still do. You understand that the fear is operating from a different mental system altogether. This understanding allows you to choose approaches that actually reach and influence the subconscious. Visualization, affirmation, meditation, and other practices that work through impression rather than logic. Think about fears that seem to have always been with you. Perhaps anxiety about scarcity, worry about rejection, or dread of uncertainty. When you trace these patterns back, you'll often find they connect to messages received in childhood, family financial traumas, cultural narratives about safety and danger, or religious teachings about worthiness and judgment. Recognizing these sources doesn't eliminate responsibility for your current choices, but it provides crucial context for understanding and transforming reactions that might otherwise seem irrational. The daily practice involves three essential elements. First, patient observation, noticing fear reactions without immediately trying to change them, asking, where did I learn this response? Who taught me to be afraid in this situation? Second, conscious reprogramming, deliberately introducing new spiritual truths through visualization, affirmation, and emotionally resonant experiences that create fresh impressions in the subconscious. Third, loving vigilance, maintaining gentle awareness of patterns without judgment, celebrating progress without demanding perfection. This process of deprogramming inherited fear and installing new patterns of trust isn't an overnight transformation. It's more like tending a garden. Consistent care over time produces gradual but profound changes. The key is persistence without pressure, consistency without criticism, and faith in the mind's natural capacity to learn new patterns when given the right conditions. If you've recognized how some of your fears were inherited rather than chosen and felt the freedom in that recognition, write "breaking patterns" in the comments. Now, I want to explore how this understanding of deprogramming fear connects with one of the most powerful spiritual tools available to us, the practice of visualization as a creative force. In a world dominated by material thinking, we often underestimate the creative power of imagination. Most people treat visualization as a pleasant mental exercise, a form of wishful thinking, or at best, a psychological technique for motivation. But what if visualization is something far more profound, perhaps the highest creative act available to human consciousness? The mindset revelation that transforms everything is recognizing that visualization is not merely imagining what isn't real. It's seeing with the soul's eyes what hasn't yet taken form. It's the first stage of genuine creation. Just as an architect must envision a building before it can be constructed, just as an artist must see an image internally before transferring it to canvas, the circumstances of your life are first shaped in the invisible realm of imagination before manifesting in visible experience. Think about how fear uses this same principle against you. When you worry, you're essentially practicing negative visualization, seeing unwanted outcomes with emotion and detail. And as we've discussed, what the mind dwells on with feeling and consistency tends to manifest. The breakthrough comes when you consciously redirect this same creative power toward what you desire rather than what you dread. Behind the scenes of every spiritual tradition is this same understanding. The inner eye is creative. What you see clearly and consistently in consciousness tends to take form in experience, not because of magical thinking, but because visualization directs attention, shapes decision-making, influences perception, and activates the creative forces of the universe that respond to clear mental images charged with feeling. I discovered through my journey that effective visualization isn't about forcing yourself to think positive or denying reality. It's about consciously planting seeds in the fertile soil of the subconscious. Seeds that, when properly nourished with attention and emotion, naturally grow into experience. Just as a farmer doesn't need to force a seed to sprout, you don't need to force visualization to work. You simply need to understand and apply the principles by which mental images become physical realities. The transformation begins when you start practicing what I call sacred seeing, deliberately creating and holding mental images that align with spiritual truth rather than fear. This isn't fantasy or escape. It's conscious participation in the creative process that's constantly unfolding through your life. When you visualize from a place of spiritual alignment rather than wishful thinking, you're working with universal law rather than against it. This approach naturally connects with affirmative prayer, another powerful tool for dissolving fear. Most conventional prayer approaches the divine from a place of lack or desperation. Please help me, please change this, please give me that. But true affirmative prayer operates on a completely different principle. It doesn't beg, it declares. It doesn't seek to convince God of anything. It aligns the mind with the divine goodness that already exists. What makes this combined approach of visualization and affirmative prayer so revolutionary is that it shifts you from passive hoping to active co-creation. You're no longer waiting for circumstances to change or pleading for external intervention. You're participating in the creative process by aligning your consciousness with divine principle and holding clear images of what you know to be spiritually true, regardless of current appearances. The impact of living this way transforms how you approach every challenge. Instead of focusing on problems and asking, "How do I fix this?" you hold a vision of the solution already complete and ask, "How is this resolved in divine mind?" This subtle shift activates completely different mental faculties and spiritual resources. Rather than struggling against what is, you're seeing beyond it to what can be. The hidden wisdom that conventional approaches miss is that visualization works through impression. not through force. The images you hold consistently and with feeling create pathways in consciousness. They become the templates through which you perceive, interpret, and respond to life. This is why casual, occasional visualization produces minimal results, while consistent, emotionally charged visualization creates profound shifts in both internal state and external circumstances. The practical application transforms daily spiritual practice. Instead of abstract concepts or empty words, visualization provides concrete experiences in consciousness. When fear of lack appears, you don't just affirm abundance intellectually, you see it, feel it, experience it internally with such clarity that it begins to reshape your decisions, perceptions, and actions. This in turn creates new patterns in your external reality. Think about experiences where simply changing how you saw a situation completely transformed the outcome. Perhaps you approached a challenging conversation with a vision of mutual understanding rather than conflict, and that vision itself created a different interaction. Or you held an image of health and vitality during illness, and that image supported healing in ways medical intervention alone couldn't accomplish. These aren't coincidences, they're demonstrations of the creative power of consciousness. The daily practice involves dedicating time to deliberately see what you desire to experience, not as a distant hope, but as a present reality in consciousness. See yourself moving through the world with confidence rather than fear. Visualize relationships characterized by love and understanding rather than conflict. Hold images of abundance flowing naturally rather than scarcity constraining. And as you hold these images, feel the accompanying emotions as if the experience were already present. This practice becomes especially powerful when combined with affirmative prayer, declarations of truth that align with your visualizations. Rather than asking for what you want, you acknowledge what is already true in divine mind. Divine love surrounds and protects me now. Abundance flows to me through expected and unexpected channels. Perfect health expresses through every cell of my body. These aren't attempts to convince yourself of what isn't true. They're alignments with what is eternally true beyond temporary appearances. If you've experienced how deliberately holding positive images changes both your inner state and outer circumstances, write creative vision in the comments. Now I want to explore how these powerful tools of visualization and affirmative prayer connect with the development of fearless consciousness, a state beyond merely managing fear to actually living in freedom from it. When we talk about overcoming fear, most approaches focus on coping mechanisms, psychological techniques, or ways to push through despite feeling afraid. But what if there's something far more revolutionary available to us? What if instead of better managing fear, we could actually transform consciousness itself to a state where fear simply doesn't find fertile ground? The mindset revelation that changes everything is understanding that visualization and affirmative prayer aren't just techniques, they're weapons of light in the truest sense. Not weapons that attack or destroy, but spiritual tools that transform consciousness from within, creating an energetic field where fear cannot survive. Just as darkness doesn't need to be fought but simply illuminated, fear doesn't need to be battled but transcended through the consistent application of spiritual light. Think about how differently you experience the world when you're in a state of peace versus a state of anxiety. It's not just that your feelings change, your entire perception shifts. You notice different details, interpret events differently, access different resources, and make completely different decisions. This isn't just psychological. It's a fundamental alteration in the field of consciousness through which you experience life. Behind the scenes of every authentic spiritual transformation is this same progression, from struggling against what isn't wanted to actively cultivating what is desired, from fighting darkness to igniting light, from resisting fear to establishing such a powerful field of peace that fear finds no resonance within your consciousness. I discovered through my journey that fearless consciousness isn't something that must be attained through heroic effort or decades of practice. It's actually our natural state when the obstructions are removed. Just as water naturally flows downhill unless blocked, consciousness naturally returns to peace when the barriers of false belief and misidentification are dissolved. The transformation begins when you start using visualization and prayer, not just as occasional practices, but as consistent creators of an alternative field of consciousness. Each time you visualize from truth rather than appearance, each time you pray from spiritual certainty rather than material doubt, you're strengthening this field. You're making it more substantial, more stable, more accessible in everyday life. What makes this approach revolutionary is that it doesn't depend on external circumstances being perfect. In fact, challenges often become the very catalysts that prompt deeper spiritual practice, leading to more profound shifts in consciousness. This means that the very things that once triggered fear can become doorways to greater freedom, not because they've changed, but because your relationship to them has transformed. The impact of developing this fearless consciousness transforms everything. Decision-making shifts from anxiety to clarity. Relationships deepen from authenticity rather than need. Work becomes creative expression rather than security-seeking. Even health reflects the peaceful state of a mind no longer contracted by chronic worry. This isn't just feeling better, it's living from an entirely different dimension of being. The hidden wisdom that most spiritual teachings don't emphasize enough is that fearless consciousness isn't something you achieve through striving. It's what remains when you stop identifying with the limited self that believes it's separate, vulnerable, and alone. Beyond all the spiritual practices and techniques lies this fundamental truth. Fear exists only at the level of the separate self. When you remember your true nature as one with the divine, fear simply has no place to root. The practical journey toward this state involves what appears paradoxical: acceptance alongside transformation. You accept where you are in this moment, including any fear that's present, without judgment or resistance. And simultaneously, you hold the vision of fearless consciousness as your natural state, not as a distant goal, but as your true identity beneath temporary appearances. Think about moments when you've experienced complete freedom from fear, perhaps during profound joy, deep meditation, creative flow, or overwhelming love. In those moments, you weren't employing techniques to manage fear. You were simply so absorbed in a different quality of consciousness that fear was irrelevant. Those weren't anomalies, they were glimpses of your natural state when identification with the separate self temporarily dissolved. The daily practice involves both formal periods of spiritual work and informal remembrance throughout the day. The formal practice includes time dedicated to visualization and affirmative prayer, deliberately creating and reinforcing the field of fearless consciousness. The informal practice involves momentary returns to this awareness amid daily activities, brief remembrances that anchor you in peace regardless of external circumstances. What emerges through this consistent practice is a consciousness that no longer needs to understand everything in order to rest in peace. This doesn't mean becoming passive or disengaged. It means functioning from a deeper level of being where trust isn't dependent on having all the answers. It's the profound knowing that even amid uncertainty, you are held in a love that never fails. This fearless consciousness doesn't make you immune to life's challenges. It doesn't prevent difficult emotions from arising or eliminate all problems. What it does is radically transform your relationship to whatever arises. Instead of being defined by circumstances or controlled by reactions to them, you remain anchored in a peace that transcends understanding, yet is absolutely real and reliable. If you've experienced moments of consciousness beyond fear, not managing fear but actually free from it, write "fearless being" in the comments. Now I want to explore how this fearless consciousness connects with unity awareness, the recognition that dissolves the fundamental illusion of separation that gives rise to all fear. The deepest spiritual truth across traditions points to a single revelation. We are not separate entities struggling in isolation, but expressions of a unified consciousness temporarily experiencing itself through individual perspectives. This understanding isn't abstract philosophy. It's the direct antidote to fear at its very root. The mindset revelation that transforms everything is experiencing unity consciousness, a state of awareness where the boundaries between self and other, human and divine, inner and outer, begin to dissolve. From this perspective, the fearful mind that lives in constant separation, worried about its security, status and survival, is recognized as a temporary contraction of the infinite rather than your true identity. Think about how profoundly our experience changes based on what we identify with. When you identify solely with the body, physical threats seem overwhelming. When you identify exclusively with your role or reputation, social rejection feels devastating. When you identify completely with your possessions, financial loss appears catastrophic. But what happens when you identify with the unified field of consciousness that contains and transcends all these temporary expressions? Behind the scenes of every authentic spiritual awakening is this same recognition. The separate self we've taken ourselves to be is not our fundamental reality. It's more like a character in a play that we've become so absorbed in that we've forgotten. We're also the playwright, the theater, and even the audience. Unity consciousness isn't something exotic or distant. It's simply remembering the wholeness that fear caused us to forget. I discovered through my journey that the fearless mind lives from unity, not separation. It doesn't identify with lack or danger because it remembers its spiritual nature. This doesn't mean denying human experience or suppressing emotions. It means holding the human journey within a larger context of divine belonging, recognizing that while the waves may rise and fall on the surface, the depths of the ocean remain undisturbed. The transformation begins when you start practicing what I call identity shifting, consciously choosing in each moment what you identify with. Are you identifying with the limited personality with its fears and concerns, or are you identifying with the awareness in which that personality appears? This simple yet profound practice gradually loosens the grip of the fear-based identity and allows your natural fearlessness to emerge. What makes this approach revolutionary is that it doesn't require changing who you fundamentally are. It simply involves recognizing who you've always been beneath the accumulated layers of forgetting. This isn't about becoming something new. It's about remembering something eternal. And in that remembrance, fear loses its foundation because the separate self it was designed to protect is recognized as just one aspect of your multidimensional being, not your ultimate reality. The impact of living from unity consciousness transforms every dimension of experience. Relationships shift from transactions between separate entities to expressions of the one life manifesting through diverse forms. Work becomes not just personal achievement but participation in the creative unfolding of the whole. Even difficulties are held differently, not as personal afflictions, but as aspects of the universal journey containing their own wisdom and purpose. The hidden truth that many spiritual seekers miss is that unity consciousness doesn't erase individuality. It contextualizes it within wholeness. Your unique expression remains, but it's no longer confined to the small self defined by separation and fear. Instead, personal uniqueness becomes a gift through which the infinite experiences itself, in particular, unrepeatable ways. This is liberation without loss of identity, expansion without dissolution. Perhaps the most practical, aspect of this understanding relates to how we experience thoughts, especially fearful ones. Living without fear doesn't mean dark thoughts never appear. It means they no longer have power because you no longer identify with them. You recognize thoughts as movements in consciousness, like clouds passing through the sky, rather than defining realities you must believe or battle against. Think about how differently you relate to a thought when you say, "I am afraid," versus, "I notice fear arising in consciousness." The first statement creates complete identification with the emotion. The second creates spacious awareness that can hold the emotion without becoming it. This simple shift in perspective, from being emotions to witnessing them, is one of the most liberating practices on the spiritual journey. The daily application involves catching yourself when you slip into complete identification with fearful thinking. Notice the sensation of being consumed by worry or anxiety. Then gently shift your perspective. This thinking is happening in consciousness, but it is not who I am. I am the awareness in which these thoughts appear. This isn't denial or suppression, it's accurate recognition of your true position in relation to thought. What makes this practice transformative is that it doesn't require years of meditation or extraordinary spiritual experiences. It simply involves recognizing what's already true. You are not your thoughts. You are the awareness in which thoughts arise and dissolve. When this recognition becomes living experience rather than just intellectual understanding, freedom from fear isn't something you achieve, it's what you discover as your natural state. The journey toward unity consciousness isn't linear or predictable. It includes moments of profound clarity alongside periods of forgetting and re-identification with the separate self. This isn't failure, it's the natural rhythm of awakening. What matters isn't perfection, but the increasing frequency and duration of remembrance, the growing capacity to recognize when you've slipped into fear-based identity, and the willingness to shift back to unity awareness. If you've experienced moments of unity consciousness where the separate self and its fears temporarily dissolved, write one awareness in the comments. Now, I want to explore how this understanding of unity consciousness connects with another dimension of fearless living, recognizing that love is not just an emotion, but the very substance of reality itself, and how this recognition dissolves fear at its deepest level. Throughout this exploration of fear and freedom, we've been circling around a central truth that now deserves to be named directly. Love is not merely a feeling that comes and goes, not just a bond between separate beings, but the very fabric of existence itself. When we speak of God, Source, the divine, or universal consciousness, we're really speaking of love as the fundamental reality from which everything emerges. The mindset revelation that transforms everything is experiencing love not as an occasional emotion, but as a constant presence, an unwavering certainty that you are loved, guided, and that goodness will never leave you. Not as a concept to believe in, but as a living experience that becomes more real than any fear could ever be. This isn't about manufacturing positive feelings. It's about recognizing what has always been true beneath the fluctuations of human emotion. Think about the profound difference between intellectually believing love exists versus directly experiencing yourself as embraced by love in every moment. The first is a thought that may provide temporary comfort. The second is a recognition that fundamentally alters your relationship with reality itself. This shift from concept to experience is the journey from religion to spirituality, from belief to knowing, from hope to certainty. Behind the scenes of every authentic spiritual tradition is this same understanding, often veiled in symbolic language. The universe is not neutral or mechanical, not random or indifferent, but fundamentally loving in its essential nature. This doesn't mean everything that happens is pleasant or that suffering doesn't exist. It means that beneath the surface, play of opposites, lies an abiding presence that holds it all in perfect love, a presence that becomes directly accessible when the veils of fear and separation thin. I discovered through my journey that the certainty of being loved doesn't depend on feeling emotionally uplifted or having perfect circumstances. It's more like recognizing the ground beneath your feet, something so constant it's easy to overlook, yet absolutely essential for everything else to exist. When this recognition deepens, fear begins to lose its foundation, not because you fought against it, but because the certainty of love simply leaves no room for fear to take root. The transformation begins when you practice what I call love awareness, the deliberate recognition of love's presence in every situation, regardless of appearances. This isn't denial or spiritual bypass. It's the capacity to discern the deeper reality that remains constant, even as surface conditions change. Like learning to see the ocean beneath the waves, you begin to perceive the love that holds all experience, even the difficult and painful aspects of the human journey. What makes this approach revolutionary is that it doesn't require changing external circumstances to feel secure or at peace. The love that dissolves fear isn't dependent on anything outside you. It's your very nature, the essence of what you are beneath all the acquired identities and temporary emotional states. This means that freedom from fear is not something to be attained through effort or achievement. It's what remains when the obstacles to recognizing love's constant presence are removed. The impact of living from this recognition transforms your entire experience of being human. Challenges that once seemed threatening become opportunities for deeper awakening. Relationships shift from seeking love to expressing the love you already are. Work becomes not striving for worth, but offering your unique gifts in service to the whole. Even mortality is held differently, not as final extinction, but as transformation within the unbroken continuity of love. The hidden wisdom that many spiritual teachings don't emphasize enough is that fear ends not through battle but through surrender. Not passive resignation to circumstances, but luminous surrender to the greater truth of what you are. When you truly recognize, I live in God and God lives in me, fear simply finds no place to exist. Not because you've defeated it, but because you've remembered something more fundamental than any temporary emotion or thought. This surrender isn't about giving up or giving in. It's about giving over, releasing the illusion of separate control in exchange for alignment with the infinite intelligence and love that sustains all life. It's the recognition that what you've been seeking through achievement, accumulation, and self-protection has always been present as the very ground of your being. And in that recognition, the exhausting struggle against fear naturally subsides. Think about times in your life when you've experienced this surrender, moments when you stopped fighting against reality and instead fell into a deeper acceptance that somehow contained its own peace, perhaps during profound grief that eventually opened into unexpected grace, or facing a challenge that initially seemed overwhelming but ultimately revealed strength you didn't know you had. These weren't coincidences. They were glimpses of the transformative power of surrender to what is greater than the separate self. The daily practice involves both formal periods of opening to love's presence and informal remembrances throughout ordinary activities. The formal practice might include meditation, prayer, or contemplation, specifically focused on recognizing the love that is always present but often overlooked. The informal practice involves momentary surrenders amid daily life, brief recognitions that beneath whatever is happening, you are held in a love that never fails. What emerges through consistent practice isn't a life without challenges, losses, or difficult emotions. It's a fundamentally different relationship to the entire human experience. One where fear no longer defines your choices or limits your expression, Not because circumstances have become perfect, but because your awareness has shifted from the changing surface of life to the unchanging depth of love that holds it all. This isn't wishful thinking or emotional self-regulation, it's direct recognition of what spiritual traditions have pointed to across cultures and centuries, that beneath the apparent multiplicity and conflict of the manifest world lies a unified field of loving intelligence that is our true nature and ultimate home. And when this recognition becomes lived experience rather than abstract concept, fear naturally dissolves like darkness in the presence of light. If you've felt moments when the absolute certainty of being loved dissolved even your deepest fears, write "loved beyond fear" in the comments. Now, I want to explore how this understanding of love as our fundamental nature connects with the final dimension of fearless living, moving from occasional experiences of freedom to established fearless consciousness as our natural state. Throughout our journey together, we've explored multiple dimensions of freedom from fear, from understanding its illusory nature to practicing specific approaches that dissolve it. But there's one final revelation that brings everything together. Perfect love casts out all fear forever, not temporarily, not partially, completely and permanently. The ultimate mind shift isn't about better managing fear or having occasional breaks from it. It's about living in a state of consciousness where perfect love so fills your awareness that fear simply has no place to exist. This isn't a distant spiritual ideal. It's the natural condition of a mind that has remembered its true identity. Think about how fundamentally different this approach is from conventional wisdom about fear. We're not talking about becoming braver, more resilient, or better at pushing through despite feeling afraid. We're talking about a consciousness so saturated with the reality of love that fear becomes as irrelevant as darkness in a fully illuminated room. Behind the scenes of this transformation is a profound simplicity that's easy to miss. You don't need to become anything new. You only need to recognize what has always been true. The mind filled with perfect love isn't an achievement. It's your original state before the veils of separation and forgetting descended. The journey isn't about adding something you lack, but removing the obstructions to what you already are. I discovered through my own path that this shift in consciousness follows a natural progression. It begins with glimpses, moments of complete freedom where fear is entirely absent. These glimpses might come during deep meditation, profound connection, or even in the midst of challenge when surrender opens into unexpected grace. As practice deepens, these moments extend into longer periods, eventually becoming your baseline state from which temporary contractions into fear might occur rather than the other way around. The revelation that changed everything for me was recognizing that fear and love don't need to negotiate or compromise. They don't need to find balance or take turns. Perfect love, when fully realized, leaves no corner of consciousness for fear to occupy. This isn't because love fights against fear and wins, but because the full recognition of love reveals fear as nothing more than a shadow cast by forgetting, a shadow that vanishes not through battle, but through illumination. If you've experienced even moments when you were so filled with love's presence that fear was completely absent, write "perfect love" in the comments. As we come to this point in our exploration together, I want to thank you for walking this path with me, for being willing to look beyond conventional approaches to fear and dive into the deeper spiritual truths that set us free. What we've shared isn't just information, it's an invitation to transformation, to remembering who you truly are beyond all the layers of forgetting. If you've resonated with this message about dissolving fear through divine remembrance, I'd love for you to be part of this growing community of spiritual explorers. Subscribe to join us on this journey of awakening to the truth that sets us free from fear forever. Your presence matters here. If this message felt like it was speaking directly to your soul today, drop divine remembrance in the comments. I read them all and would love to know you were here until the end. That gentle tap on the like button makes such a difference in helping others find this content who might be struggling with fear right now and need exactly this reminder of their divine connection. There's a video right here that explores how to maintain this fearless consciousness during life's most challenging moments. Click and continue this journey with me there. The conversation is just beginning, and I'm grateful to share this path with you.